This podcast does not provide medical advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast, Everyone Dies. I'm Marianne Matzo.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete.
So grab your adult beverage of choice, something sweet or salty, depending on what phase of your cycle you're in. Mm-hmm. Turn off whatever you're binging on today. And thank you for spending the next hour with us as we discuss how people die from COVID-19. So, Charlie, What are you seducing us with today?
Warning. This dessert is not meant to be eaten or baked by the faint of heart. Created by Marcel Desollier, something French, of the Trellis restaurant in Williamsburg. Williamsburg, where, Marianne?
I don't know. I'm assuming Virginia. Well, but there's no Williamsburg, France, is there?
Missouri.
What the? What hell? We don't know. We're from Michigan. We're from Detroit. We don't know this stuff. If it's not White Castle, I don't know about it. Okay.
Oh, White Castle. You know, there was a query here because all the restaurants here are closed except for takeout. But the question was, is a White Castle considered food? So I have not ventured to have a Whitey Castell, but soon I hope. Where was I? Oh yeah, Williamsburg. Well, there's a Williamsburg here in Brooklyn.
Well, maybe it's that.
So maybe it's this one. I don't know. Wait a minute, Colonial Williamsburg in Virginia.
It doesn't say Colonial, but anyway, what is it?
I forgot what I was talking about. Oh yes,
chocolate.
Yes, a chocolate White Castle. So the Trellis restaurant in Williamsburg, and we don't know which Williamsburg. So this recipe takes a big commitment to make, but the payoff is worthwhile. Now, I have not made it yet myself, but I have eaten it many times. And the interplay of all those rich, chocolatey flavors is divine. Be forewarned that in addition to standard kitchen equipment, you will also need an electric mixer, a 9 by 11.5 inch cake pan, and a 9 by 3 inch springform pan, plus a 9 inch cardboard cake circle.
I'm already going over my head.
Yeah, there'll be a quiz afterwards, so take notes. I'm reading it, and I'm not sure what the hell I'm talking about. So a double boiler and a pastry bag with decorating tips will make the process go smoother, but that can be improvised. If you are planning on serving this for dinner, you will want to start working on it that morning, or even better, make it a day or two before and wrap it up in the fridge. Or in my case, buy it a day or two before. Just make sure when you take it out of the fridge, there's no ribbon or wrapping or anything, so nobody asks, why is it wrapped? So you can... So with this, yes, you can mix up different layers and then set them aside over a period of several days and just break it up so it isn't quite as overwhelming. The recipe from Death by Chocolate, The Last Word on a Consuming Passion by Marcel Desollier. No relation to Marcel Marceau.
This recipe can be found on our webpage, everyonedies.org.
Uh-huh.
Everyonedies.org. That's dies.org.
Okay, good to know.
Good to know.
Yes. So, this just in. Between April 26th, the Detroit Free Press, and you can reach it at freep.com. That's FREEP.com, is showing free documentaries followed by a virtual panel discussion. Now, on April 22nd at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, there will be a showing of Palliative, which tells the story of a Detroit-based doctor doing extraordinary work with children with special needs. Please consider tuning in. So, Marianne, what's next? What's in our second half?
So, welcome to our second half. In the second half, we're going to explore how COVID-19 damages the body to the point of death. So, in other words, how does COVID-19 result in death? And resources for this discussion can be found on our webpage, everyonedies.org. And we also have a blog post about this if you'd like to read about it. So, I hope I'm not going to be too, I always worry about being too teachy, but, I'm a nurse, I'm a teachy person, so forgive me if I go off that rail. So, the coronavirus is a respiratory virus, meaning it involves your lungs, that will invade the breathing or the respiratory system. And the COVID-19 can infect both the upper and the lower respiratory tract. The upper is your nose and throat, and the lower respiratory tract are your lungs. So what happens? COVID-19 infection starts from the nose and then goes down to the lungs. Now, I rant about a variety of things to you, Charlie, but one of the things of late is seeing people out in public with wearing masks
right,
that are under their noses and just covering their mouths. That's not how you wear a mask. It needs to cover your nose and your mouth because that's where stuff comes out. That's very scientific. I've seen people out for walks all alone on the street wearing masks. If you're all alone on the street, you don't need a mask. You can put it down below your chin and breathe in the air. You're right. Okay. And then if you are approached by anybody who has any spit or anything like that flying about them, you can put your mask up over your nose and mouth and protect yourself. But wearing a mask that's just around your mouth is not effective because where COVID-19 starts, it starts in your nose. In most cases, the virus stays in the upper respiratory tract, which is everything above the windpipe. Now, if it stays up there and doesn't move down, your symptoms can include a fever, a cough, or sore throat. But if the virus moves down to the lower tract, that's when symptoms like shortness of breath can occur. If this virus reaches your lungs, it causes inflammation, which is swelling, and fluids start to build up in the lungs, which makes breathing difficult. Now, when you have fluid in the lung sacs, in the air sacs of the lung, that's called pneumonia. And you've heard of people having pneumonia, and they have difficulty breathing. They might cough up kind of a smelly green kind of stuff out of their lungs. That's pneumonia. What your lungs do is they have these little bubble sacs in them. They're called alveoli. Kind of a cool name, starts with an A. Alveoli. And what they do is they add surface to the lungs. Because if you just had a smooth surface of the lung, that would be the only surface area that you would have in order for the oxygen to come out of the blood and exchange with the CO2. The oxygen would go into the blood and be moved all around your body. So the lungs are responsible for exchanging CO2, which is your burn off, with oxygen, and then sending that oxygen out throughout the whole body. That's the job of the lungs, is that exchange of the CO2 with oxygen. So if you have pneumonia, if those sacs that are in your lungs are full of fluid, they can't do their job. So the gas exchange is not effective, and blood oxygen levels can fall below normal. Now, you want your blood oxygen level to be around 99, 100%, right? You want to have as much oxygen being exchanged in your lungs because heart needs it, your brain needs it to stay awake, your body needs it to stay healthy, right? If that's not happening, if it falls below normal, you're going to be feeling very sleepy, very sluggish, and your other vital organs are not getting the oxygen that they need to stay healthy. So when the virus enters those air sacs, those alveoli, it interacts with a specific type of cell that lines those sacs. And these are called type 2 cells. Now, I know you're saying to yourself, oh, Jesus, just, put me out of my misery. I don't want to learn all this stuff.
I know, I'm thinking that. So.
Well, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
But this is important because COVID-19 has these spikes on it. You've seen the pictures of COVID-19 with those little spikes all over it?
Yeah.
It's those spikes that let it interact with the molecule on the type 2 alveoli cells, which allows it to invade those cells. So think of a lock and a key. There's a lock on the type 2 cells, and the COVID-19 has all those little keys sticking out of it. And it comes in contact with those type 2 cells. The lock goes in the key and it says, baby, I'm in. And it can invade. It does. Honest to God. It puts that little key in there and it says, baby, I'm in. You don't believe me? Shake your head. I don't care. So that's how the COVID-19 virus gets into the lungs. Now, once COVID-19 gets inside those type 2 cells, it's going to start replicating and multiplying and dividing and adding and subtracting. No, it doesn't subtract, but it just does all that math in there. And it makes its cells grow and grow. Woo! I got so excited, I knocked my microphone off here. Whoop, wait a minute. I got to get myself in control. It's just, it's just this whole big thing that happens, right?
Right.
So, what?
Right.
I'm glad you're excited with it. What can I tell you? I like science. So it replicates, it multiplies, it divides, and it creates copies of itself within the cell. Well, what happens is that cell gets so full, it bursts open. And when that cell bursts, it releases hundreds of new virus particles that can go on to infect other cells within the lungs. And that keeps happening and happening and happening until the lungs are so full of the virus, it can't do its job anymore. It can't exchange the CO2 with the oxygen, and the body doesn't have enough oxygen in order to live. So what happens is the immune system starts to respond to the virus's destruction of the type 2 cells. And this immune response determines if the body is going to recover or if it's going to die. If you're healthy when you get COVID-19, you really do have a better chance of recovery. Everything is really kind of healthy and normal, and you're strong and you're well nutrinized, you have good nutrition. You're healthy and you can fight this virus. But if you are in an immunocompromised state, if you have already inflammatory processes within your body, for example, obesity is an inflammatory process within your body. If you're older, if you have pre-existing conditions like diabetes or heart conditions, you're going to have a more difficult time fighting off the COVID-19 because you're not in the peak of shape in the first place. And now you've got the COVID in your type 2 cells wreaking havoc and blowing up all over the place. You're going to have a harder time fighting this virus. So the person's immune system is going to respond to the virus by causing fever and inflammation. That's why we check for fever. This immunoresponse can cause fluid to leak into the lungs and make breathing even more difficult. It's at this point where you might need a breathing machine and ventilator in order for you to breathe, because you're too sick at this point to really be able to do it on your own. So if you need a breathing machine, you're going to have to be in an ICU, an intensive care unit, because that's real intensive care. They put that tube down your throat. You can't talk. You're sedated, so you're asleep because your body says, what the heck are you doing? You're putting a tube down my throat and you're having some outside machine breathe for me? I don't think so. I'm going to fight this. I want to pull out that tube. I want all this to end. Well, that can't happen because it could literally end then. So they sedate you. They put you to sleep with medicine. They will tie down your wrists so that you don't, as a reflex, kind of pull out that tube and give you time for your body to be able to heal and for the immune system to respond and take care of that virus.
So with this thing down your throat, so when you say sedated, are you asleep the whole time while you have this thing down your throat, or?
Right. So you're in what's called a medically induced coma.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So you're not awake. You're sedated because the natural response of a human being is, you're going to put something down my throat, I'm going to pull it out.
Right.
Because you can't breathe, there's stuff down your throat. And even though you have the machine breathing for you, it's like, wait a minute, what? Your brain just can't process that.
Yes. So
they just put you to sleep, and trust me, you will, praise Jesus that you're asleep, because you don't really want to be awake during all of that anyway. So if the virus reaches the lungs, it causes inflammation, fluid to build up. The gas exchange is not effective when you have pneumonia. And so you're going to need that ventilator to help you to breathe.
Okay.
Now, you can spend weeks in the ICU as you're waiting for your body to heal. There aren't antibiotics or anything that we can give. You don't treat a virus with an antibiotic. There isn't medicine. Either your body is going to heal or it's not.
So it's just the luck of the draw?
No, it's what condition you're in before you get the virus.
Okay.
So if you're already immunocompromised before you get the virus, you're going to have a hard time here. If you already have asthma, which is, not healthy lungs and respiratory system, you're going to have a harder time. If you already have a heart condition, you're going to have a harder time. If you already have diabetes and obesity, like I said, obesity is a inflammatory process within your body, you're going to have a harder time. If you're very, very old, you're going to have a harder time. And you might say to yourself, well, I know somebody who is 22 and who died of this virus. Yep, there's always those outliers of situations where, that isn't exactly what should have happened, but I'll talk about what could have happened in a minute. Mm-hmm. That's my cliffhanger.
Oh.
So, and even with the breathing machine, you're going to have people who aren't going to die. People will die from COVID-19 when their bodies are unable to heal their lungs. So a weak immune system will not be able to fight off the COVID-19 virus. In the Spanish flu in 1919, they saw many deaths of young people. And they thought to themselves, what's going on here? We thought the old people were going to die, and it's the young people who are dying. What they figured out is because of the younger people's overactive immune system, they responded in such an extreme way to the virus that it caused massive damage to the body and death. Where the older people, their immune system was a little bit slower, which was what the virus needed in order for the body to recover. So it's sort of like Goldilocks. We need an immune system that responds just right and doesn't get carried away. You don't want an overactive one. You don't want an underactive one. You want one that's just right. Now, you have absolutely no control over how your body is going to respond. So you don't know. Is your body one of those overly overachievers that says, I'm going to go balls to the walls and I'm going to fight this? And it could end up really compromising the whole system. Or is it one of those that say, yeah, slow and steady does the job. Fine, we'll get out of this. We're just going to do it slowly. You really don't know. Now, for those that don't survive, the funeral homes are overwhelmed with the volume of bodies. And bodies are being stored in refrigerated trucks or temporarily buried in large graves with other people until it's possible to have the burial that the family would like.
Right.
And I know in New York, you're seeing a lot of mass graves, right, Charlie?
Oh, yeah. And it's the same thing on our Potter's Field is an island in the middle of the East River. And just that, they literally trenches to put bodies in because it's just an overwhelming number of bodies. Yeah.
Right. Now, none of this is usual. None of this is normal. All of this is hard, but it's temporary. We're not doing it out of political reasons or out of any kind of ideology. It's the fact of a pandemic that when you have a large number of deaths that overwhelm the system, that you have to have alternative ways of dealing with it. Those refrigerated trucks are one alternative way. Potter's Field is another alternative way. I've seen people talking about, oh my God, this is so terrible. They're telling doctors on death certificates that even if the person had heart disease or diabetes or whatever, to put as the cause of death COVID-19. And it's being treated as some sort of conspiracy theory. So let me just take a minute and talk about death certificates.
Yeah.
A death certificate, what you do is you put the primary reason the person died. So let's say you have heart disease and asthma. Well, did those contribute to your death? Sure they did. Would you have died at this point of time if you weren't sick with COVID-19? Well, we don't have a crystal ball, but probably not. You were on a ventilator, you had COVID-19. That's why you died. So the cause of death is number one, COVID-19. And then there's other causes of death that are listed. Your heart disease, your asthma, your diabetes, or whatever. So that then, when they're doing statistical analyses, it's for nothing else but statistical analyses. They can say the primary cause of death was related to this virus with these other causes of death contributing. It isn't about politics. It isn't about anything other than to accurately be able to count the deaths with people who had the COVID-19 virus. So you look at people and you say, oh my God, they were 82. They might have died anyway. They might have.
But they might have died at 85. Yeah.
Right. But they have this virus and that contributed to their cause of death. And so it's just like if, you were hit by a car and you're 82 years old. Well, did you die because you were 82 and had a heart disease, or did you die because somebody hit you with a car? Car accident goes as number one, and then, your other comorbid diseases. It's just how it works. It's worked before, how it's been done before COVID-19, how it'll be done after COVID-19. It's just the way it is. So when they put out those announcements that say, be sure that you're documenting that the person had COVID-19, it's not for any other reason but document it as one of the causes of death.
Yeah, that's what happened. I mean, here in New York City, 2 days ago, the mayor announced just that, and suddenly there was an increase in I don't know how many hundreds of additional cases for that reason. Instead of putting down, Mr. Smith was 83 years old and he had difficulty with, ingrown toenails, and that's why he died. No. In addition, he had also been in the hospital and, had the virus. So all that was switched around, and suddenly the number of people who had died shot up.
And it's not that, it's sort of like, well, are we counting them right? That's all it is. Are we counting them right?
Yeah, just accuracy.
And when we fill out the death certificate, we want to be accurate. We want to include the things that contributed to that person's death. And if they had a diagnosis of COVID-19, then it contributed. So Out of the need for not having more people infected, families are asked to make the sacrifice of not being in the hospital with their loved ones because they could have COVID and be bringing it in, or somebody in the hospital could have COVID and they'd be taking it out to the community.
Right.
So we need to stop that transmission, right? So the comfort at the end of life is falling to the nurses. And I'll tell you, I've been a nurse for 40-some years. Comfort at the end of life always falls to the nurses. I've been in so many situations where, we're releasing somebody from a ventilator and we're in the room with the family. We're preparing them for that. And I could look out to the nurse's station and the physician is standing out at the nurse's station, kind of not involved in the process, but kind of waiting for what's coming. And the palliative care team are the people who are in that room. So nurses are often the ones who are doing that comfort at the end of life. I'm not saying that physicians don't do it. I'm saying that it typically, that kind of care falls to the role of the nurse. In Birmingham, there was a nurse, Shelby Roberts, who held a cell phone that was encased in a plastic bag as the relatives of this patient sang Amazing Grace.
Oh.
And she prayed for that woman who was dying of the virus. And she said, I sat there and listened and held her hand and put on the gospel station on the TV, said Roberts, who worked at the medical intensive care hospital at UAB Hospital. I told the family that I didn't know what was going to happen, but no matter what, I would make sure she didn't die alone. That's just what I would want. And that is what most people would want. And thank God nurses are taking the time to give that to people as they're taking their final breaths from this disease. If you want to read more about how this disease compromises the body and ends life, we do have a blog post on our webpage, everyonedies.org. And we have some resources on the webpage in terms of the virus and how you die from this virus. Charlie, any questions or comments about that?
No, just a thought. I mean, it's as you were saying, that somebody, goes in a hospital, they have to have this tube down their throat. They are out. And as we discussed in the last podcast about just how many more people are just dying alone. It's just sad. And I understand, the reason why this thing cannot keep being spread. I don't know. It's just sad to think about it. That's all. But
well, thank God the nurses are there and they're aware of this and that they're making sure that they're putting that cool hand on the fevered brow, holding hands, talking to people.
But then with that too, then that puts nurses in jeopardy.
Nurses are already in jeopardy. They're in those intensive care units. They're taking care of 3-4 times as many patients as you ever would consider to be a safe situation. They don't always have the PPE that's required. It's a very difficult situation for nurses. And on top of that, on top of extra hours, extra shifts, they're also, helping people make that transition from life to death. It's
right.
They're incredible people, what they're doing.
Yeah.
So in our third half, we're doing our segment, The Vultures Are Circling, which is hosted by our roving reporter, Buzzkill Charlie. This segment tells stories or answers questions about people who take advantage of sick, dying, or grieving people. And if you have stories that you'd like to share with us, we would like to hear about them and help educate other people about what's going on. please send them to everyonedies.org or mail@everyonedies.org. So, Charlie, what's going on now?
Well, just when you thought things couldn't get worse, scammers are ratcheting up their game. As we reported before, and bears repeating, recently widowed spouses feeling vulnerable have been taken advantage of. Hospital computer systems have been hacked into and held for ransom, putting patients and medical staff in jeopardy. And now, scammers are going after investors and consumers. The $2.3 trillion relief package, known as the CARES Act, sends financial aid, directly to people, either as a direct deposit or a paper check. So be careful of any emails, texts, messages from social media that ask for money or personal information. The information you give could be used to steal money from your accounts. The Social Security Administration is warning people to not give out their information when told they will receive their benefits by way of a gift card or wire transfer over the internet. Social Security payments are not changing. You will receive your benefits the old-fashioned way, either by mail or direct deposit. Scammers make people think they were overpaid for unemployment insurance and ask for overpayments to be paid back by credit card. Listen, any overpayment issue will arrive through the U.S. Postal Service. And don't fall for robocalls selling coronavirus treatments, vaccinations. Neither of these exist. There is no cure right now, or even home test kits. They don't exist. Remember, the federal and state governments will not ask you to pay for anything up front in order for you to receive your relief money. The government will not ask you for your Social Security number. They have it. They won't ask you about bank account number or your credit card number. Do not send money to someone you do not know. If you're online, on your computer, on your smartphone, do not click on links from sites from people you don't know.
And even from people you do know, because it might not be those people, right?
That's true. These scammers are smart and can basically disguise themselves online as someone you're close to, and bingo, there you are.
Don't fall for it. And it's all over the place, especially with this $1,200 relief check coming.
Right.
People are getting scammed left and right, and we really feel like we want to warn you. If it doesn't feel right, don't do it. And even if it feels right, don't do it. The government will direct deposit that $1,200 check if you've paid your taxes and if you've gotten your refund by direct deposit.
Right.
Otherwise, they're going to send you a check. Those are the two ways it's done. They're not going to ask you for anything.
So please don't fall for that. And just be aware that these horrible people exist who are, trying to take your money in general, but especially at this time. So take care of yourselves.
Right.
And thank you for listening. Please stay tuned for future episodes of Everyone Dies. Our thanks to our CEO, retired Major General David, our producer Sandy, John, our technical advisor, and our friends and family who are making this podcast a reality. This is Charlie Navarrete.
And I'm Marianne Matzo.
And we look forward to talking with you soon.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.